How's it going, guys? I'm Theo Joe, and as you might know, Google and Apple are not exactly the best of friends. They're obviously fierce competitors between Android and iOS, but recently they have announced that they will be teaming up to create a program, app, API, whatever you want to call it, to help with contact tracing of the coronavirus. The idea is that they'll create some sort of system that will allow people to opt in and then potentially be notified if they've been in contact with someone who else has opted in and then realize that they have coronavirus. So that way you know that you potentially need to get tested, or if you start seeing symptoms or something, then you probably have it. So what we're going to talk about is how that system works, when it's going to be rolling out, and whether or not I think it's actually going to be something that's going to work or not. So it was just a couple days ago where Google and Apple released the same exact press release on each of their sites talking about how this is working, and they have a nice little logo with both of their logos on it and stuff. And probably the easiest way to explain it is using their own PDF slideshow, whatever, that they released along with this. So you can see it says privacy safe contact tracing using Bluetooth low energy. So here are some major checkpoints. It says explicit user consent is required, so this will be opt-in. It says doesn't collect personally identifiable information or user location data, so it just purely uses Bluetooth. And it also says list of people you've been in contact with never leaves your phone, and that's an interesting point, and we'll see in a second how that exactly works then. The next point is people who test positive are not identified to other users, Google, or Apple. So to clarify this, it will tell you if you have been in contact with someone, but it won't rat them out and tell you exactly who the person was. It doesn't even know the name of the person, just basically an ID number. Then it says will only be used for contact tracing, blah, blah, blah. So they're not gonna be using this for advertising or anything, they've explicitly said. And they've also said elsewhere that they would be planning to dismantle this whole system after the pandemic's over. So they're not gonna like maintain this and keep tracking who you're going next to. And then finally, of course, considering this is a collaboration between Google and Apple, it doesn't matter if you have an iPhone or an Android, it works across both. And then also in this presentation, it gives an example of a situation where this might work. So it says, in this one, Alice and Bob meet each other for the first time and have a 10-minute conversation. It looks like they're at a bus stop or something. And then it took me a second to realize, but basically the few days later is from left to right, not top to bottom, even though the color shade is weird. So at the same time where they're meeting, it says their phones exchange anonymous identifier beacons, and these beacons change frequently, so I guess it's more private. And then moving from left to right a few days later, Bob is positively diagnosed for COVID-19 and enters the test result in an app from a public health authority. And then also at the same time, with Bob's consent, his phone uploads the last 14 days of keys for his broadcast beacons to the cloud. So it seems like a list of people that you've been in contact with, or the identifiers at least for the phones, doesn't leave your phone unless you're positively diagnosed and give it consent to upload. And then here's the next step in this situation example. It says Alice continues her day unaware she has been near a potentially contagious person. And then at the same time, Alice's phone has been periodically downloading broadcast beacons for everyone who has tested positive in her region, and it says a match is found with Bob's anonymous identifier beacons. And then it says sometime later, Alice sees a notification on her phone. It says alert, you've been exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. I'm assuming it's not going to say exactly that. That's just an example. And then it says Alice's phone receives the notification. That's what we just see. So overall, I would think it's a nice idea, but quite honestly, I don't see this being super useful and very practical in the real world for a couple reasons. So first, let's go over what I think are the good things about this. One good thing is it doesn't use location data, which I think would just be a huge can of worms, and I don't think people would go for that at all. I like that it just uses Bluetooth. So overall, I'm not really concerned about the privacy aspect of this, to be honest. I would probably still download it because Google and Apple did release documentation on the specifications for this API and like the cryptographic, exactly how this is going to work. So it's definitely going to be audited, and I think we're going to hear about it. If there was some malicious intent in there, we would definitely find out about it. And I kind of trust Apple more than Google, but I think Apple actually pretends to care about user privacy. There was that instance where they refused to let the FBI break open their phones, stuff like that. So Apple does have a better track record than Google, at least. I don't think they would tarnish their brand by rolling out some mass surveillance thing. So I mean, when it is available, I will get it, but like I said, I'm not sure this is gonna really do much to help for a few reasons. First of all, the first phase of this, which is just gonna be an app you have to seek out and download, is not gonna be ready till May. So the fact that it's an app, it's opt-in, which I mean, it has to be opt-in, obviously. People would freak out if this was like compulsory and tracking who you're in contact with, even if it's anonymous. People would not want to hear it. So it's opt-in, meaning not everyone's going to opt in. A lot of people won't even know about this, and you have to go and download the app. People are going to have to like actively go on the App Store, search out this app, or maybe get the email, choose to download it. It's not integrated into the operating system yet. I just think it's going to get not a lot of usage. Now, one important thing is Apple and Google have said that eventually they will create a phase 2 of this where it will be integrated into the operating itself through some sort of update, in which case it'll still be opt-in, but you won't have to go and download an app. So this presumably means that, you know, when you go to update your phone, whether it's Android or iOS, then it'll have a big pop-up for everyone asking you to opt in, which obviously would have a much better chance of having people using this than having them go and have to know about the app and choose to go and search it out. I don't think it's going to be useful at all until it's integrated in the operating system. And even then, it might be too little too late at that point. The next thing I'm not so sure about is how it identifies people who have been diagnosed, and it basically requires a code from some health agency in your country to provide you after getting a positive test. So presumably you get tested, and then with the positive test, they will give you a code to type into this app, and then that is a way to identify it, and that's a good way, obviously, to prevent people from trolling or whatever, from saying, yep, I'm positive, and then, you know, every person they come in contact with gets a notification and freaks them all out. There would absolutely be people that would do that, so it's understandable that you want this to at least be very accurate if someone does get a notification. But I think this will definitely slow things down, because say you're in contact with someone, they're asymptomatic for the time being, they don't even know they have it, and then by the time that they do have symptoms, maybe it's 3 days later, and then maybe it's another day before they decide, oh, you know what, I better get tested for this, and then who knows if they're even able to get tested. You know, there have been situations where people have symptoms, but they're not even able to get tested, and then how long that will take after they get an appointment for the doctor, or even if it's a drive-through, how long does that take? And then, you know, you get the code back. There's so many little delays that add up. So I would think by the time you go through all this and then someone gets a notification, well, they might have already been infected for days, and they might already be symptomatic. They might already know that they have been infected by the time that they get this notification. I just don't see it being fast enough to really make a big difference. Where I do think it would help is if someone's infected and they don't know it, obviously, and they're asymptomatic. Maybe they're one of the people who are asymptomatic the whole time, or they're asymptomatic for a very long time. Then they get the notification and they know that they could be infected, but that could also lead to the problem where testing would have to be so widely available where someone who is completely asymptomatic would be able to get a test. So in a lot of states, in the United States especially, it's the case where you can't even request a test unless you have symptoms. So it's kind of like, well, what's the point? You get a notification, you've been in contact with someone, what do? Just try to get a test? If you can't, then maybe wait around for a few days to see if you get symptoms. You can't wait around forever just because the app told you might have been in contact with someone who had it. Another issue is, even if this whole thing works perfectly, how many labs will actually support this Google API app? I would assume that not every single lab, private and commercial, in the whole country or countries is going to support this. So what if you go get a test at a lab, like maybe a small lab or something, and you get the test back, you're positive, you don't get a code. And then maybe they say, well, we don't use that system. And then anyone you've been in contact with, you know, they have no idea. So overall, I just think this depends on too many things working perfectly and too many things aligning. It requires almost everybody, or a ton of people, to actually go and seek out this app and start using it. It requires people to have testing so widely available that they can get tested right away. And then it also requires testing to be fast enough to notify people before they're symptomatic and know it. I mean, it could be helpful in the future if there's like a resurgence or something down the line, or maybe if there's another pandemic in a few years, they'll know how to do this and it'll be ready to go. But I think just right now, I don't see it working out too well. Now, like I said, I'm gonna get it when it becomes available. It's better than nothing, and I'm not really concerned about the privacy for the reasons I mentioned, and I would recommend you get it when it does come out, whenever that is. But like I said, I don't know how useful it's gonna be, but still better than nothing. Anyway, if you guys wanna keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is one talking about the screening app that Apple created about symptoms. For if you do have symptoms, maybe it'll let you know whether or not you should get tested or whatever. I made a video talking about that a couple weeks ago, so you can just click on that. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.